Hello, it's Charlene Lee here, and I am going to be talking today about how to start disrupting. And I just wanted to say that this has been a great opportunity to do these live sessions around a bunch of different topics. And I get asked this question all the time. So I thought I want to go into a little bit more about, so how do you actually become a disruptor? I've been talking to corporate people, to leaders in all different parts of environments. And I also have been talking to college students and high school students and their teachers. And the question is constantly being asked, so how do I actually do this? How do I become a disruptor? And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how you actually do that. So if you're joining this session live, I would love for you to introduce yourself. And also, if you consider yourself to be a disruptor, how did you get your start? So share a little bit about yourself. Share how did you begin disrupting? Did you start doing this at an early age? Were you disrupting preschool and kindergarten, for example? Or did you come into your disruption a little bit later? Did you really start feeling your ability to create change at a later stage in life? So I will give an example for myself. I started a company when I was 42. I was far from being a spring chicken. I was like this old hen, suddenly realizing that I did not want to continue doing what I was doing, working at the same company. And I had a thought, an idea that I could do something really disruptive, do something really different, and start an analyst firm that was completely disruptive. So unlike other analyst firms like Gardner and Forrester, I was at Forrester for almost 10 years, they typically have a business model where you are selling subscriptions. You have a big sales team, really effective at driving a relationship inside of very large businesses. As a startup, as a person of one, hanging up my analyst shingo, I couldn't do that. So we decided to do something very disruptive, which is to give all of our research away for free. But it was also a really interesting time. When my partners and I started Altimeter, it was in the depths of the recession back in 2008, 2009. And so we figured there was a need to understand how to use all of these different tools. So to build a market, to build presence, we gave the research away for free. And instead of getting a couple of thousand people to read our research, we would get 50, 100,000 people and have a lot of presence in this new space called social media. So that's how Altimeter got its start. But if I think about it, how I got started as a disruptor was as a young child. Because growing up in the Detroit area as an Asian American, the daughter of immigrants, I was really an outsider. I was disruptive just by being present in my community, because we were one of the few people of color anywhere within our community outside of Detroit. So I grew up feeling like the only outsider, the only person that was there. And so it took a lot of courage to just show up every day and be different. And I think I got used to it in many ways. And I didn't even realize how formative that experience was. And it set me out to think about the world differently, to look at things differently, to be comfortable with being different. And being a disruptor requires that you be different. So I just wanted to share that little bit of a story to kick us off here, because I do think that disruption is a very personal journey. It's something that we come to see ourselves as a disruptor because we see things differently. We train ourselves to think about the world differently. So I can see here a couple different issues here. I can see from my friend Kevin. Hi, Kevin. Good to see you here. That you saw disruption when you were diagnosed with dyslexia. Thank you for sharing that. And that you had to flow into this. So thank you for sharing that. I can also see here people coming in from different parts of the world, from Rio de Janeiro, from Sweden. Again, thank you so much for joining here. And what I would love to have you do again, if you're just joining, is to share in the comments, how do you see yourself as a disruptor? How did you get your start becoming a disruptor? When did you first realize that you saw the world differently. So to just begin, I want to talk about a couple of different ways on how to get started during disruption. The first thing I think I want to say is, first of all, you don't necessarily have to be a leader, defined as a leader, to be disruptive. You don't even need to have a title to be a leader. The key part of creating disruption is that you see a problem that needs to be solved. You see a change that needs to happen. And leaders make change happen. They see the change and then they act towards it. It's as simple as that. And when you are leading, what you figure out is that your job isn't to just keep things the same, to do the status quo. It is to create change. And I like to say that leaders create change. And if you're not creating change and you're not a leader, you're a manager or you're an individual contributor, which are all great, but you're not leading. So leaders, by definition, are disrupting the status quo. So how do you show up as a leader? How do you start thinking about things? Well, you look for that change to happen. And this is the second part about disruptors. Disruptors are not just creating change, they are creating exponential change. And what I mean is they're just not satisfied with just a little bit of incremental change. They see something that really needs to change in a big way. Now, that could be big in terms of your small community or even in your family about how you do things. It doesn't have to be about changing the entire world, as in like space exploration or changing climate change. It could be something very small in your neighborhood, in your community, in your organization, on your team. But you are still going to be rocking the boat. And that comes to my third thing, is that this is going to be hard. If it was easy, people would have done it already. So being a disruptor says you're looking around, you're seeing a change that could happen. You're thinking, I could make that change happen, and you prepare yourself for that change. So, so one of the things I think is how do you actually figure out what that change is? So I wanted to show you one of my favorite pieces of information. This comes from AccuPoll. They have been surveying people in the United States quite frequently now. This is their fifth wave of information. I'm just going to enlarge it a little bit, but you can see they've been surveying people and asking, how are you going to do things differently? What are you going to increase or decrease after the crisis is over? And you can see a lot of people are very keen on making sure that they are free from germs. Our sense of what is dangerous and could damage our health is very, very heightened now. So we're going to be much more aware of germs. But you can also see a lot more people are going to be buying things for doorstep delivery for groceries. They may never have done this before. And having done it now with the rise of places like Instacart and Shipt, other delivery services, they're realizing this is a pretty good service. It keeps me out of harm's way, and it's also very convenient. So they're experiencing this and see themselves doing it even more. But what I also find interesting here has been consistent is a stronger sense of maintaining your well-being around mental health, exercising, taking care of yourself, focusing on your wellness. So these are new emerging needs that are happening. So what a disruptor does is a disruptor anticipates where these needs are going to be coming from, and then makes sure that they're thinking about how could I actually fulfill these needs? Because when we have this much disruption happening to us because of things like a pandemic, we're thinking the needs don't go away. They're shifting from one phase to another phase. So being aware of what's happening with people and their needs that are emerging is a really good thing. So I want to just think about what are the things that you could potentially be thinking about disrupting. So I have a few examples here. For example, one of the things that I'm struggling with is cooking over and over and over again the same meals. And I would love to have meal planning or recipe recommendations that are tied to what I actually cooked over the past 2 weeks. So it knows that I already cooked this, so it recommends something else differently to me. Or if I liked it, what else would you actually recommend? There are so many recipe sites, but it doesn't recognize the fact that I've actually cooked something and liked it or didn't like it. So I would like a little bit more meal personalization in my planning and recommendations for recipes. Germ fighting. What does 6 feet look like? How do I know that I'm actually 6 feet away from somebody? Is there some ways that we could use these devices in our pockets to set up a little bit of a alarm, sort of like reminding you to stay 6 feet away because it detected that somebody else with a phone was within 6 feet of you. So if it changes my location, I walk out the door, this setting will go on and remind me if I come across unknown phones near me within 6 feet to keep my distance. What about these virtual meetings that we have on Zoom? They're fantastic. They close the distance, but they still don't really close the gap in our ability to have really good, strong meetings. If the fact that we're already using this digital environment, could it record our words and actually take meeting notes for us? There's a small company called Voicea, Voicea, that was recently acquired by Cisco that literally listens to the conversations, takes notes, and then creates a summary of the conversation, and then can throw it into your inbox, into your collaboration platform, into your CRM to track those conversations. Why that isn't built into Zoom is beyond me, because I would love to get a summary of my conversations, of my notes, so that I can focus on the conversation rather than having to take notes on the side. And what about just the fact that we are in these collaboration meetings don't take into account the fact that there is a collaboration happening. The fact that collaboration takes place on a separate platform from Zoom, that there are no pre-meeting rooms or post-meeting spaces for us to converge. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. And I think I would love to do is to go through and talk a little bit about how do you actually go through this process of finding these opportunities. So a couple things. First of all, it's really listening and understanding from customers, walking in their shoes, having empathy for them to understand, like, what in the world are you doing that is that takes multiple steps, for example, is frequently done over and over and over again, that could use a shortcut. Or you're thinking, there's gotta be a better way to do this. So it's literally having your radar up all the time and trying to think about, what is it that you are trying to think about? What are the things that could potentially be done differently so that when you are thinking about new areas to disrupt, these new emerging needs, that they are actually coming out and that you're identifying them. So it's looking at the world that you have and doing this one important thing, questioning everything. You're questioning constantly whether this is the right way to be doing things, and could it be done in a better and different way? And to not only do this for yourself, but to also do it with your customers and who you think are going to be your existing customers. And very importantly, with every single person in your organization, all of your employees, to train them to think about, how could we be doing things differently? It's when you have an entire organization thinking in a disruptive way, where you really get the power of a disruption mindset happening across an entire enterprise, where everybody's thinking about disruption. So a couple other quick things that I would ask you to think about when you're thinking about how to disrupt and to lead disruption yourself. One of the things I hear from people is that they just feel that they're not ready. They're putting prerequisites in front of them that says, well, I've got to finish college. I need to finish this job, finish this project. I need to take this course. I need to get that experience before I'm ready to disrupt, before I'm ready to start a company, before I'm ready to take on a new role. And I find this to be especially the case for people who may feel like they're the only in the room, the only woman, the only person of color, the only old person, the only young person. Whenever you feel that way, for whatever reason that you have put upon yourself or society has put upon yourself, to say, you're not ready, you're not qualified to be a disruptor, I would say take all those things off the table. There is nothing that is going to prepare you to be a disruptor. You're never going to be ready, because the requirement to be a disruptor is simply that you see that change. There's no other requirement. There's no requirement that says you have to have a certain degree or experience or know certain people. It is simply that you see a need, you see a change that needs to happen. So if you catch yourself saying, well, I'm not quite ready, think about all the people who really had to work really hard to get to that point of disrupting. None of them were ever really had that kind of prerequisite other than a deep sense of curiosity. I look at Albert Einstein, I look at Thomas Edison. Neither one of them went to college, got formal educations, and yet they were intensely curious about how the world could be different. And I think that other quick things are anticipating that this is going to be a really hard road to craft and to go forward on. Again, if it was easy to do, then somebody else would have done it already. So prepare yourselves for the obstacles. Prepare yourself for the barriers that are going to be inevitably in your path forward. And be determined that you can find a way around that. And if you can't find a way around it, you can find other people who can help you along the way. This is where I think it's really important to do one thing in particular, which is develop your bench. Having bench strength as a disruptor. And that means two things. One thing is having people who you can turn to help you along that journey. And the second thing is there's nothing like cold hard cash. I'm not talking about lots and lots and lots of cash, but a little bit of cash to give you options to be able to pursue different places and strategies. I was one of the first things I learned in business was that cash is king. And if you don't have cash, then your options are really limited. So this is not to say you have to have cash. You have to have any sort of liquidity to be able to be disruptive. But if you have just a little bit, it just gives you so many more options to be able to pursue the different paths around these inevitable obstacles. I think the last thing, as some people have mentioned, and that is the having the permission to disrupt. Again, it's almost like asking, do I have permission to disrupt? Do I have permission to be a leader? Do I have permission to be out there and doing this? There's nobody you need to ask permission from this. Even in very structured organizations, people ask me, where are the opportunities to disrupt if the box is really small, if I'm being pinned in and can't move from left to the right? I always go back to saying every organization has leaders who have very specific objectives that they want to accomplish. So even if you're being blocked left and right from all these different ideas, go back and figure out for your leader, what are the top 3 objectives that are really important? And then figure out what are the things that you can disrupt, things that you can change, things that you can actually have some impact on that is going to move that objective forward. Because I've worked with so many leaders over the past 2 decades. You can talk to them about all the different reasons they need to do things differently, the technologies that could make things work so much better, and they won't care at all unless you can relate it back to something that they're trying to achieve. So the more that you can understand the people you are trying to help disrupt to create that change, the more you can put your disruptive ideas in that context, the better off you're going to be. So I'm just looking through the questions here that people are having. So one of the questions here is somebody asked, so thanks, Michael, for bringing up this point. Somebody would say, hey, that's a great idea. Now's not the time. We're going to put it on the back burner. Maybe we'll come back to it in a year or so when we're ready. I really just keep saying back to somebody, if you can push back to say, this is the thing that we really need to do today, and phrase it for why this would help us move our overall strategy forward. That's the key thing. And if they give you reasons back that you don't agree with and you keep pushing and pushing and pushing, then this is what I say to people who feel like their disruptive ideas are just not being heard, even though they've given the best go. You have to exercise the power of 2 feet. And that means you walk out the door and you take your talents elsewhere to where they will be appreciated. That could be really hard in an environment like this today. But I think everyone has to make those choices. But if you really find that you can find a place where that is going to take full use of your disruptive capabilities, then I think you owe it to yourself and to that organization to give that a try. I'm just going through and seeing if there are any other questions, but I want to see, again, feel free to put into the comments any questions that you have. But I also, again, would love to hear from you. What are the areas that you're trying to disrupt? How do you see yourself as a disruptor? What are the barriers that you're finding from being able to start on your disruption journey? And I hear from people quite often, again, that this whole idea of disruption and permission, they don't necessarily have to go in the same space. Have you ever heard the term, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness? I think there's a very strong truth to that. But I also say it's sure darn good to make sure that everyone is aligned. And if you're trying to create disruption, or if you're a leader encouraging people to create disruption, it's really important that if you're going to give people and encourage a sense of agency, that everyone is clear on what that strategy is that you're trying to accomplish. It makes no sense for everybody to be disrupting in 360 degrees, when what you really need is people to be disrupting against a very specific goal and strategy, especially around these emerging needs that customers have. So a couple questions here is, how do you find customers or clients who truly are ready for change? This is a great question, because if you are, it's a pretty simple one. Ask them when was the last time they had a disruptive change. Ask them when was the last time they were uncomfortable moving into an area and how they dealt with that discomfort. When I'm working with a new client, I'm often asking them, so when was the last time you did a disruptive change? And it's a giveaway when they say, oh, we did this. We definitely disrupted ourselves. And it was 2 years ago, and it was so hard. It was so disruptive. We're still recovering from it. That tells me a lot. It tells me that they were capable of doing this, but it took everything that they could out of themselves to be able to do that. So if we're going to propose another change, another disruption for them, they're still suffering from change fatigue, from disruption fatigue. And their ability to do another big move is not going to be strong. So how do we ease them back into this? How do we start taking smaller disruptions, smaller changes, so that we can start them on that road, building that resilience, that ability and capability to disrupt themselves? They have to build confidence. You have to build confidence in yourself and the organization that you can actually do this and survive, and more importantly, thrive. Just going through and just seeing if there are any other questions here. Scrolling through, just give me a second. One of the other things is it's difficult to get others to buy in, David. It's a great comment, to your vision if you lack gravitas. I love this point, because it can't be like you're frivolous about this. You need to have your act together if you're going to propose a change. And I would just use a different word than gravitas, because gravitas has two connotations to it, like age or seriousness, or even a sort of heaviness to that. And I think it's more the fact that it's difficult to get people to buy in if you haven't taken the idea seriously, if you haven't done your homework. So David, you raised a really good point. What I found in my research is that these disruptive moves were never taken lightly. There's a lot of research that goes into it, a lot of contingency planning, a lot of scenario planning. So I think in many ways, one of the ways to be disruptive is to have your act together and to make sure that these little details have been thought through. This reminds me at Amazon how one of the things they do is to write a press release from the future that describes in great detail what the world looks like at this point in the future when their new product or service is released. And then they have 6 pages of FAQs, and they describe in great detail how this is going to happen. It's those details, those FAQs, that that gives you that credibility to be able to propose something that says, yeah, I thought about all these implications. I've understood what the risks are, and we have contingency plans built in so that we can go and create that disruption. Let's see, I'm just going to close out to see if there's any other last questions here. And the one other thing is, I just want to say, I think the last part, again, is alignment. Thank you for Tiffany. That alignment is necessary. And David, I think thank you for the clarification that gravitas is professional presence. So yes, I think the professional presence is absolutely important. I think we've all seen people who are trying to present themselves and think that if you are going to just show up and do this on the fly, it is not going to work. So being able to present, and I could do another whole session just on like presentation skills, because presenting isn't just getting in front of a stage with a mic on and presenting. It's how do you present yourself all the time. So having that professional approach is absolutely important. All right, I think I'm gonna close out by just adding a few more things. I do want to just promote one thing in particular. I think that might be helpful for you all. One of the things I'm doing this Thursday is a manifesto writing workshop. It'll be May 7th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And you can RSVP at this link that I have, bit.ly/manifesto-May20. And the idea here is, one of the premises I have around creating disruption is that you have to be able to create a movement too as a leader. And creating a movement, that one of the most powerful things I've ever seen that organizations do and leaders do is to create a manifesto. And a manifesto sets out in longer than just a sentence, because a purpose is great, but usually a capstone, 1 or 2 sentences. And a manifesto is a statement of what you believe, putting out your beliefs of how you think the world should work. And very importantly, what actions you will take to make that world come to be. So we've done this manifesto writing workshop within Quantum, this community that I have, and the response was great. So we wanted to do it again. We are limiting it to 100 people because it is a Zoom meeting, so we'll be able to interact and talk about things. So be prepared to come and work. And by all means, I encourage you to come and check it out. Would love to take you through that whole workshop of how to create a manifesto. And by all means, also, please come and check out Quantum Networks. It is a community for disruptors to form and develop our leadership capabilities to create exponential change, not only in our organizations, but also in our society and our communities. So it's at quantum-networks.com. Hope you come and check it out. It is free to join. We do everything from having these workshops to having a book club. And of course, there's a deep community there of people who are supporting each other. So I hope you found this helpful. And again, what I would encourage you to do to start disrupting, the number one thing, go and start. Pick something, find something that needs to be changed, and put together a plan of how you would actually make that change happen. Pull the people in who could help you make it happen, and then start disrupting. There's no better time to do this than now, because there are so many problems in our world that we are facing today in these turbulent times. So go forth, disrupt, and good luck to you on your journey. Thanks so much for watching. This is Charlene Lee. Have a good day. Bye-bye.